Hello, I'm Chris Eddy. This is a special edition of VLGA Connect coming to you from Fast Track 2026, a packed house at the RACV City Club and a national audience this year for a very important topic, incivility and the threat to local democracy. In the first of three panels for the day, we look at the cost of incivility. What is the impact that it's having on councillors, council staff, and on community trust?
I'm planning on sharing some of my experiences as a councillor over the last 10 years, but also experiences of friends and colleagues from councils right around Victoria and beyond, as time allows. I think it's really important that we set the scene for how incivility, how abuse and harassment actually affects councillors as real people, how it affects their families, how it affects their ability to function in their roles. So that's what I'm hoping to bring.
Well, here at Fast Track 2026, my role predominantly as a journalist, although I wear many hats, is really to remind people about the very widespread nature of incivility. It is not just local government that is grappling with this global problem. I come from the industry that is most hated, so I know a lot about incivility. However, the message that I'm bringing today is that there is a lot we can do about this. There really is. And it's important to take that message away from the conference today, I think, that there are structures, there are tools that we can use, and predominantly it's about leadership.
I think everyone is experiencing incivility to some degree, and I think people don't quite know how to think about it or how to respond. It's quite alarming for people, and I think what mostly happens is people quietly change how they live their lives. They change how they interact with each other, they change how they participate in their communities. But when it comes to councils and councillors, we don't want people to step away from that. We need as many people as possible to put their hands up for election. We need people willing to serve, and we need to be able to be out there and to be accessible to our communities. You want to be able to have a chat to your councillor in the street. If we've got councillors, elected reps who are not prepared to engage in that because they're worried, they're changing their patterns of behaviour, of accessibility, that's a real threat to local democracy. I do think we have seen a shift over the time that I've been a councillor. I think we've seen a real change in the way political communication works and the standards we expect in political communication. Some of that has come from overseas, but also the pandemic and our really significant experience here in Australia of the COVID-19 pandemic sped that up. People retreated to spaces they felt safe, to where they were feeling heard, where they were having their opinions reflected, and I think we've come out of that the poorer.
I love the fact that the VLGA is doing so much around this issue. I think that's really, really important. But it's also, and shows a lot of leadership. But it's, when I think about why is it that this is something that is affecting a local government and councillors and local government staff so much, it's because local government is really close to the skin. People take it personally. We're at a time when democratic participation, political participation is really fraught, and many people are feeling unheard, unvalued, disrespected. And so the connection, the closest connection they've got to governance, to government, is local government. And that's why this is such an important issue for local government.
Look, personally, there have been some quite difficult and challenging times, but I think even more than that, my greatest disappointment about it is people who would have been really great in these roles not even putting up their hands. We know, we've got some evidence to show generally that the civic participation of women, for example, in public life globally is really impacted by this sort of thing. And often the types of abuse and harassment experienced by women and various minorities as well can be just that much more toxic. So if I'm feeling it with fairly thick skin and as a man who has been in public life quite a long time, I always think, well, how difficult is it for that, that woman down the street who's thinking they might like to get involved, and then, sees some of that or considers some of those issues. There are a lot of people out there. We don't even know the contributions they might be prepared to make, and we're all the poorer for that.
It takes leadership, and it takes acknowledging that people need to be heard. There is a great hunger globally for people to feel respected, to see competence, see fairness in governance. So the big takeaway, I think, is that we have to work hard at making sure we reach out to ensure people feel heard and are heard, that we share the stake that we have in a problem, that we don't attack people, we attack a problem, and that we bring to it our best selves, and that we bring humanity back to what we do rather than fear of disunity.
I am a very big fan of the VLGA. I think the organisation is very forefront of understanding what council needs. We're changing so quickly in local government, and to know that we're supported from outside organisations is really important.
For panel 2, our experts looked at how do we rebuild respectful dialogue in a polarised world.
The panel that I'm talking on is really about how can we rebuild respectful dialogue in a world that's increasingly polarised. And there are things that we can do, and we can start doing them today.
Well, I mean, this is such an important issue, not only here in Victoria and Queensland, where I live and work with local government. I think I saw a report last week that 65% of politicians globally have been attacked violently, either physically or emotionally or mentally, and this is really scary, and it does undermine our democracy.
Really, polling and winning are the wrong course of action to be taking. We might have different perspectives and views on issues, but deep down there's so much more that we have in common, and I'm really encouraging people to think more about the shared outcomes that we want to achieve, and the fact that we can achieve more together by working together rather than discussing different viewpoints.
So it's important as a member-run organization that you're taking care of your members, but you're elevating the conversation, because this is a hard conversation to have with your members. Because as I said, the first part of them addressing this is also looking inward. Are we walking the talk? Are we behaving the way that we say we do? So raising this in a safe, encouraging way, you can have those tough conversations with councillors and mayors to say, yeah, this is important. It's important that we begin with ourselves and then we look at our community.
I think there's very good reasons why incivility is on the increase. And really, if you have a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a lot of people are feeling the difficulties of having somewhere to live, of putting food on the table. They're not having that sense of belonging. You know, the feelings that people have are real. The ways that those experiences are being expressed are not always civil.
So I really applaud the VLGA that they're taking this stance and they're having these conversations.
The VLGA is really showing leadership in talking about incivility today. You are getting feedback from people right across Australia, not just local governments within Victoria, that it's a real issue, but it's not just something to talk about. I think what VLGA is doing is really bringing people today together to think about what are some of the solutions.
Well, it's an important conversation to have, you know, and I think sometimes people feel a bit worried or scared, or, you know, they won't put their hand up. But, you know, like my experience, having seen this on the agenda, going, yeah, actually that's something that really needs to be talked about. That's what VLJ are doing. I think it's a great initiative.
And for the final panel on the day at Fast Track 2026, how do we make it safe to serve, giving the attendees some practical tools to deal with incivility?
I think civility is one of the key challenges of our time. I think local government has an extraordinary role to play in ameliorating and in working deeply with communities to address that challenge. I think the thing I've most got out of the conversation I've had today is just to what extent Councillors and local government sit absolutely at the edge of that, both in terms of the day-to-day dynamic of council, concerns raised today about managing differences of views and different opinions, and how that plays out in the community more broadly. So I think that civility is absolutely fundamental. I think local government has this really significant and important role to play. I think you're at the edge of the sorts of capabilities, attributes, dispositions that we need to cultivate in order to create a narrative that unites us rather than divides us. I suppose my challenge to the VLGA is what role can you play in a more collective way of a whole of community response to civility? We've heard today different people say, you know, the sort of bureaucracy in local government, the processes, the way it plays out can make it difficult to think collectively what leadership role local government can play. I think the people sitting in the room today are extraordinary examples of outstanding citizens, people who've stood up and are prepared to act on behalf of their constituents. I congratulate them for that. I encourage the VLGA to continue its ambition to see this conversation, to encourage the development of the skills and attributes to step into this space, and for local government to see itself as a key player in a collective whole of community response to how we might actually address the challenge. One of the really seminal questions at the Leadership Foundation that we're exploring is where are those places in which diverse perspectives can be considered in respectful ways so that people feel heard, listened to, but also appreciative that we live in a democratic context and that multiple perspectives are its strength rather than its problem. And I think local government has a significant challenge in that regard, but given the sort of convening today, the work that your association's doing, the ambition of the people in the room, I feel optimistic and hopeful at the really important role local government can play in actually helping us as a nation develop a narrative, as I said, that unites rather than divides us. The shift that we would like to see is more agency for communities to have voice and a sense, as I said, of autonomy in shaping the futures that they want. And I'm really interested in things like citizen assemblies and other things which reimagine how we might build spaces, as I said, for difference, but in that context actually find a unified voice that dictates the priorities of communities, the sort of culture and capability infrastructure they need in the governance and capital, and particularly the confidence in the governance and in the governance in which that can then become acted upon.
The reason that it's important that the VLGA is running this sort of activity and having these sort of open discussions is that if we don't talk about this, we'll never get an answer. And we have to talk and we have to listen and try and understand what the problem is.
I'm really grateful that the VLGA are continuing these conversations because it gives us more of a voice, it gives us a better advocacy platform, and it brings us together to socially network as well, so we don't feel as alone in our issues that we're facing.
It's vital that peak bodies take this topic on because no council can do it individually. They'll always be branded as some kind of troublemaker, and it needs to be from a peak body position to make sure that it's got representation and the voice of the councils underneath them. So vital.
At the VLGA, we love local government and we want to protect it. In our view, incivility is one of the biggest threats to genuine local democracy, grassroots local democracy and participation. These sort of events are really important. We have to get together to be able to share ideas, to bolster each other, to tell each other that we need to keep going and remind each other why what we do is important. I'm hoping that today and other events like it can bring really usable practical strategies for councillors and council officers so that they can continue in their role, continue serving their communities and continue contributing to strengthening local democracy.
And that's a wrap for Fast Track 2026, tackling that very important topic of incivility. We've had a fabulous day here at the RACV City Club in Melbourne. Fast Track, the VLGA's principal leadership development activity each year, will be back in 2027. Look out for details on that very soon. But thank you for joining us on our special edition of VLGA Connect from Fast Track 2026.